Hello. Welcome to the MuseScore Café for July 11th, 2018. The topic that I want to talk about today is software development. I just want to talk about the experience of actually working on MuseScore as a software developer. It's something that's it's really what got me as involved as I am. I'm a musician, obviously, and I started using it as a musician. But what really engaged me and brought me to the level of involvement that I have now was when I started getting involved in development. And a couple of people have asked me to talk about that, and I'm more than happy to oblige. So let me just test and make sure this thing is on, because I'm seeing an error message. Let's see. Yeah, that looks like it's good. Okay, sorry. I guess I want to talk a little bit about my background in development. And by the way, as always, please, if you're watching this live, go to the YouTube site to watch it. Click the little YouTube icon if you're not already on the YouTube site, and then you'll be able to watch or use the YouTube app. And then you'll be able to participate in the chat. And then if you ask any questions or leave me any comments, I can respond to those because I'm more than happy to do that. That always goes for these cafes. So as I mentioned, my background, I have a degree in computer science, but it comes from the 80s. I graduated in 87 from Florida State with a computer science degree. In 1987, C++, the programming language, was, I like to say, about 10 minutes old. It actually was a little older than that, but the first reference manual had only been published while I was in school, and it was brand new. It wasn't really a thing. So I didn't really learn about C++ in school. When I went to grad school, I got one course in it. It was like this new thing they decided to cover. So when I started working, I was working at Hewlett Packard, and one of the projects we worked on after I had already been there for several years was using C++. So in the early 90s, I started using C++ and did some development using C++ for maybe, I want to say, 2-3 years there. And then I left HP to just go into music. So that's mid-90s. And let me just check this and make sure this isn't... Okay, how to use the chat thingy. It's just a dark gray area. All right, so I'm going to actually look at that. We are going to go to watch this on YouTube, and so you can see, because I want to make sure this actually works from other people's perspective. So if I go to my YouTube... actually, no, let me go to masteringmusescore.com, because that's how people are normally going to be getting here. If we go to masteringmusescore.com and then go to the cafe, what should be the case now is if I click here under current episode and then click the YouTube link down here, it should send me to YouTube. And at that point, YouTube link down here is if I have a chat widget. It should send me to YouTube. So I had been telling a story about my background, which may or may not have been audible at all. Much better. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay, so let me just briefly recap the story. I got my computer science degree back in the 80s before C++ was really a thing. I used it briefly in my career at Hewlett Packard, which I left in the 90s to do music full-time. And then when I started contributing to MuseScore development was probably like 15 years after I left HP, and I had not done any real programming since then, and certainly hadn't touched C++, so I needed to brush up when I decided to get back involved. So what I'm going to actually do here is I'm just going to walk through the process of what it looks like to fix a bug. And I've picked one that I already know what's involved. I'm not going to go through the whole... Really the fun part, I should tell you, about fixing the bug is the hunt, the detective story, the trying to figure out where the problem is. It's this is the ultimate nerd talking, I agree, but it really is challenging and fun and stimulating to track down a problem. And at some point, I will probably really just focus something on that. But right now, I want to talk more about the process. So I'm going to pick a bug that I kind of already know. At least I have a pretty good idea how to fix. And so what I'm going to do is show you, first of all, if you go to MuseScore.org, the issue tracker is where bugs are reported. If you use help report a bug from within MuseScore, this is where they end up going. And the bug that I'm going to fix involves fingering. And so I'm going to type fingering into the search box here so I can find the bug. And it's right here. The bug is that we have a command to add fingering to notes, but it doesn't work on tab staves. It also, or staves. It also doesn't work for percussion. And so by that, what I mean is, let's see, oh, is this, that's MuseScore 2. I actually should, well, I'll show you the bug in here. So if I do this, and then I select the note and say add text fingering, and I have a shortcut I've defined for it, Control-Alt-F, it lets me add a fingering. But if I add a tab staff, select strings, guitar tab, and if I add a note here, and then do the same thing, Control-Alt-F, nothing happens. Or add text fingering, nothing happens. In part, that's because tab staves are defined to not show fingerings by default. But even if I change that option to say show fingering right here, it still is not going to help me. Control-Alt-F, and it just doesn't do it. Or add text fingering, doesn't do it. So that shortcut just doesn't work for tablature. And that's kind of a problem because people writing for guitar use fingering quite a lot, and we added that feature, well, in part for guitar. The feature of being able to use a shortcut to add fingerings rather than needing to use the palette. So I want to fix that. And so when I read the bug description, it first of all, it has a number here, and I'm gonna need to know that number in a second. In fact, I'm just gonna go ahead and do this right now. The first thing I'm going to do, since I've already set up a whole environment to be able to build MuseScore, is I'm gonna go. No, I don't have the my command line window up. So what I need to do is use the command line, because there's some things you can actually do without the command line. You can probably do all of this without it, but I learned, back in the 80s, and so I'm pretty comfortable with command line as a way of doing things. People who aren't can use more graphical ways of doing this sort of thing. But I'm going to go to my where the folder where all my MuseScore sources, and I'm actually going to create. Oops, git checkout. Okay, slow down. Checkout. I'm going to check out a new branch, and I'm going to give it this name, 274071. 274071. And then I'll give it a name, fingering tab. This just gives me a place where I can make my changes without worrying about messing up anything else. That's an easy way of maybe describing. This is now I have this work area set up. And now that I have that work area set up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the actual source for MuseScore. This is the actual code. You're looking now at MuseScore code. This is a program called Qt Creator, or Qt is how it's supposed to be pronounced, actually, Qt. This is the program that most of us in the MuseScore development community use to help us with the development. It's basically a fancy editor and wrapper around a bunch of tools that you use to combine to kind of automate things so you don't need to use the command line so much. Actually, interestingly enough, this whole program, Qt Creator, I guess I'll pronounce it that way, is when I mentioned that I worked on a project at Hewlett-Packard written in C++, it was a product that we produced called SoftBench, which was actually one of the very first commercially available programs like Qt Creator. These things are called, software development environments or integrated development environments. There's different terms used for them. But it's basically a fancy editor with tools built in, a button you can press to compile the program, a debugger that's built into it, and it's ways of combining all these tools into one graphical interface. And so the product that I worked on in Hewlett-Packard back in the 90s that was written in C++ was SoftBench. It was one of these types of tools. So I have this program fired up, and there's a file I have loaded. MuseScore, the source is spread among dozens, at least hundreds, I think, files that each have code in them. And this one in particular, the CPP is for C++, shortcut. This is where commands are all defined. And I don't remember the name of the command. Actually, I do, but I'm going to pretend I don't. But I know it's got the word fingering in it. So there it is. Fingering text is the name of the command. So I am going to remember that. This is where the commands are defined, but then I need to find where the command is actually handled, and it's in a different file. But if I don't know which, I can do an advanced search for that. And this is like one of the things that this tool does, and it knows how to search not just this file, but all the files that make up the MuseScore source. And so as you can see, it is searching. It's actually taking much longer than I expect it to, but because sometimes that's very fast. Probably because I'm running the video. And this is where we add that command to the menu, and this is where that command gets handled. And so if the command is fingering text, this is the part of the code that handles when you press a shortcut or when you execute a menu command. We just go through and say, well, was it this command? If so, do this. Was it this command? Do this. Was the command fingering text? If so, do this. Command add text. So now I need to find where this function is defined. And here's one of the nice things about a development environment like Qt Creator. I just control-click on it, and it takes me right to that function definition. So here's command add text, and here is the code that handles that. And I have looked at this function only a little bit, but I know from my experience developing software, I don't really have to read it all line by line. I kind of have a vague sense of what I am going to expect to see, and this is what I'm expecting to see, is something that handles each type of text differently, that based on the type of text. So title, subtitle, composer, poet, part, these are all handled over here. I don't care about that. I want to find the fingering part. I want to find where fingering text is handled. Here it is. So, and sure enough, here is what happens. So we find the element that is selected when the person gives the command, and then we check to make sure that there was something selected. We make sure it was a note, and then we make sure it's a pitched staff. Well, gee, if it's not a pitched staff, it's going to just give up. I don't want to just give up. So I think the thing to do is going to be just get rid of this thing. It's possible that it's not going to work if it's not a pitch staff, but I'm going to be optimistic, because why not? I'm just going to be optimistic and think maybe this is enough. So I'm just not even going to check to see if it's a pitch staff. I'm just going to let it do its thing no matter what. So I save my change, and then I hit the debugger button. And what that's going to do is it's going to compile the code and then start up MuseScore for me. With my changes there, and then I can test and see if it worked. So because my system, well, first of all, you should know, if you're developing on Linux, this is the fastest environment you will get for any given hardware. Mac is, I think, almost as fast. Windows is definitely slower due to a number of things about how the tools work. So the process of waiting for it to compile is slower on Windows than it is on other systems. It's also the case that's partially just inherently because of how Windows works. It's also just because of the tools that we use. The way MuseScore was developed originally on Linux, and then the tools that we use to make it work on Windows are maybe not as efficient. But it's also the case then that my hardware is not particularly fast. It's a Microsoft Surface, but it's the lowest end version with I like the fanless processor on it, but it means it's a slower version. So I'm basically stalling while it's doing its thing. If you want to see what it's doing, I can look at compile output, and we can see that it's doing stuff. So it's finding the file right now, scoreview.cpp. Yeah, that's the file that I actually changed. It's realizing that it needs to recompile that. I said MuseScore consists of hundreds of files. Tools like this are smart enough to realize you only changed one file. I only need to recompile that file. So it'll recompile that file and then link it with all the other hundreds of files. And it's actually the link stage that can take a while too. So I have pretty good confidence at this point that this is going to work. Now, it's entirely possible that it will work. It will let me try to add fingering, and then because the tab staff wasn't set up to understand fingerings being added this way, that it will crash later on. That's possible, and I'm not going to deal with that. I'm not going to make you watch me deal with that. Of course, I'm not making you do anything. Hopefully, you're enjoying a little bit about this process. So this is something that I do. 500. Okay, there we go. Someone is telling me there are 500 C++ files, so, and 800 header files. There we go. So there you go. There's about 1,000 files here full of code. How many of them I looked at? I don't know. I probably looked at a couple hundred of them myself. A few dozen probably that I've worked on regularly. Like this one here, scoreview.cpp, is where a lot of things are handled. A lot of commands are processed here. A lot of things having to do with how the screen is set up. The score part of the screen is all handled in here. So this is actually one of the more important files. It's one of the bigger ones. If I scroll it, you can see it's pretty long. It's thousands of lines long. Some of them are just, dozens of lines long. So anyhow, it's still linking. When it's done, it's going to fire up MuseScore, and I will get to test it. Just looking ahead, if it works, and there's a decent chance it works, what I will then do is I'm going to switch back to my command line place here and take my changes and do what's called commit them. So like right now, if I do a command called diff, it's going to show me the change that I made so that I can make sure that it's the change that I made is all I've made. I haven't made any other inadvertent changes along the way. And then I can say, okay, you're not supposed to do what I'm doing, but I'm doing it this way anyhow because I always have. There's different commands you can use. And then by giving it a particular message here, I'm going to be optimistic. 274071 is the number. By putting it in the name of the branch, I also make it part of this commit message. Add fingering to on-pitched staves. So I can commit this change. This is really premature. I would never normally do this before testing, but I just want to show the process. I do this, and now it's committed on my local version of the source. Once I'm really convinced that I have it right, I then do what's called pushing it. And by doing that, by doing this, I push it, and now it is available on GitHub, which is a website you might have heard of recently because Microsoft actually just bought it. But it's where the MuseScore source lives. I mean, I have a copy on my computer. All developers have copies on their own computers, but the main copy lives on GitHub. And this whole process that I'm showing you here in this command line window is all about managing multiple people wanting to make changes, and they each make changes on their local machine, and then they all kind of get merged together. So what I just did here was I made my changes available on GitHub, and then what I would actually do is go to GitHub, and I have a everything's slow while it's linking. As I said, this computer is not the fastest computer for development. I have another one that I use when I'm otherwise really doing development, and it's running Linux. But this is okay for now. I go to the source on GitHub, And when I do that, it's going to show me that I've just committed a change and just pushed it, and give me the opportunity to issue what's called a pull request, which is basically asking the people who maintain the source to accept my change, to merge my changes into the main code for MuseScore. That's what a pull request is. It's a request to merge the source. So, and as you can see right here, it's showing me that I've just pushed this thing. So if I then go to say, do a pull request, I hit this button here, and it gives me a chance to add some comments, and I can just say, very straightforward, just there we go. So I just put that in there, and then I would hit the create pull request button. Now I'm not going to do that until I actually test this thing. As I said, I have some confidence that this is going to work, but you know, some confidence. Why, that linking is just so. This something is probably, yeah, it's probably the video that's hogging a little too much processing, because linking doesn't normally take this long. It takes about a minute on my system. But yeah, the fact that I'm doing this broadcast is probably hogging too many resources. So it's linking, and hopefully it'll be done soon, because I would love to be able to show you that this is the case. And since I don't have anything anywhere better to go, okay, so now I'm getting a comment here. Won't removing the check for a pitch staff enable you to do something that doesn't make sense on an unpitched percussion staff? That's the comment. Yeah, but I actually tested this before. You can add, and I can show you that using MuseScore 2. Okay, it looks like the link just actually finished. Using MuseScore 2, if I add a percussion staff here, I'm going to add a drum set. And if I add a note here, then even though Control-Alt-F doesn't work to add a fingering, the palette does. See, I can add a fingering. So the code to actually allow fingerings on drum set staves as well as tab staves, definitely it's there for tab staves. So if I double click the 3, then it shows up. So the code to handle fingering on tab staves and drum set staves is totally there. That's something that I had already verified before. Otherwise I would have not been as confident that this is going to work. I'm still not completely confident, but I've got my I have pretty good hopes for this. Now, boy, this link, there's no way this should be taking this long. Wow, that's kind of unfortunate. But I'm just going to let it keep running. So yeah, usually that would take, as I said, about a minute on my system. On my faster Linux system, it takes like 5 or 6 seconds. So having to wait like 5 minutes for a link is not normal. But yeah, it's that's part of the process. So usually when you make a change to fix a bug, it's going to find the files that need to be changed, compile just those, and then it relinks that against all the rest of the files. And so the whole process, depending on the speed of your system and how many files you changed, or if it's one file that changed but that file gets used in a whole lot of other files, then all those other files might need to be changed as well. So sometimes just making one line change involves having to recompile hundreds of files, and then it might mean on a fast system 10 minutes to recompile everything. On a slow system like mine, it might be 45 minutes to recompile everything. On a slow system like what mine is being right now, with the link just taking forever, I can't even imagine how long a full recompile would take. So something is going on, I think, other than just the video, because I've done things while running the video before and it hasn't slowed things down this much. it's taking that long just for the task manager to open. That's never a good sign either. But I'm going to imagine that I'm going to see my CPU at like 100%, but I'm wondering if there's something else that's running that I could just kill real quick. Oh, look at that. The CPU is not, in fact. So this is odd. This is like not really running. Okay, so I don't know what's going on here, but it looks like from where I'm sitting, this is not, I mean, I don't actually see evidence that the link is happening. This is disturbing to me. So unfortunately, this may never finish. So I think I'm going to have to just give up on that. And that's really sad to me. Yeah, something just hung because it's not running at all, it seems. Oh, is that someone with some help for me? Let's see. Perhaps antivirus is scanning it. That's never happened before, though. Yeah, no, I've never had that particular problem before. So whatever's happening seems to be really kind of unusual, and I don't know what's doing it, but it's like getting in the way of like doing anything right now. It's like Qt Creator is just hung. So unfortunately, I may not be able to complete this demo. Oh, okay, I'm going to kill that if I can. More comments. Okay. You can answer that if you like. Yeah, this is just not going to work. So, well, what we can believe is going to be the case that if I am able to complete this build at all, then I believe it is then going to fire up MuseScore for me, and, well, it'll at least let me stop. That was good. So I'm just going to try it again and just, be that person who thinks, oh, maybe if I just do it again, it'll magically work the next time. It's not going to, I don't think. So not sure what's happening here, but again, normally that link would have finished. So yeah, deleting file MuseScore.exe. So normally that build would have taken, as I said, no more than a minute, and then MuseScore would have fired up for me, and then I would have been able to test to see if my change worked. Will I leave you in suspense? Well, since video is free, I'm just going to keep doing this and keep blathering for a while, and then I will suggest that you can fast forward to the end, because now this is bugging me, and I kind of want to find out if this is going to work or not. Because there's no reason for this build not to be working that I can think of. I just built successfully earlier today. But I am curious if that fix is going to work. I think it probably will. And so this time, because it's already recompiled that file, it's not going to need to do that again, but it will need to relink again. And yeah, this, what we're watching here, these files, this message is going by, this is usually much, much, much faster. And so again, I'm going to have to believe that that's partially just the streaming video using up memory and so forth that's getting in the way there, because that shouldn't be that slow. Anyhow, I'll just talk about some other things right now. Development right now, we just released MuseScore 2.3, and then a quick little bug fix release after that, 2.3.1. The hope is that is the last MuseScore 2 release, and that MuseScore 3 is going to be coming out as the next release we do. Now, that doesn't mean any day now, it doesn't mean any week now, not even any month now, but, hopefully within the year. That's my guess, anyhow. There's no official schedule or anything, but we have talked about trying to just really focus on MuseScore 3. And so if you're interested in participating in MuseScore development, the thing to do is come over, and if now I mentioned the IRC channel, and that's where this was. So this is IRC, and this is where there's all sorts of discussion about development. So these people are all mostly developers or people who are just interested in watching the chat. And so at any given point, sometimes there's no active talk, and sometimes there's more active talk. There's some decent amount of active talk you can see right now. This is where you can like ask for help in if you're having trouble with the debugging. I guess I should just watch this for a little bit longer. Hey, hi. People, if you're having trouble understanding the code at all, you don't have to work in a vacuum. You can use the IRC channel to get help with like, I don't understand this part of the code, and then other people can help you with that. There's also forums that aren't real time like the chat is, and there's a mailing list that we've used for that too, although that's sort of being retired, I think. But the chat is quite active for this sort of thing. And so the thing is, now we have all these bugs reported about MuseScore 3. So if you want to get involved, what you want to do is follow the instructions for setting up a build environment for MuseScore 3. So I suppose I should just show what that looks like. If you, I have that link, I believe, somewhere in here, development. Okay. This is where you would get to from the main MuseScore page if you selected contribute development. I suppose I should have gotten there that way. And again, I apologize for how slow everything is on my system right now while I'm broadcasting video and trying to do a build, and who knows what else is going on that's making everything so painfully slow. But anyhow, if this page ever loads, then I'm going to kill this one here. I'll kill this one here just in case that these tabs are somehow contributing to the problem, although I really don't think that's the case. All right, so this is just hopeless. I mean, this should take a matter of seconds for these files to all update like that, and that's just not happening. And so I am definitely not happy with how that is working. Anyhow, the development page is taking its time loading as well, and it has all this information. So again, it's under contribute development is how you would normally get here. And there's all this information about how to actually create this environment, how to install Qt or Qt, and how to how to do the builds of MuseScore, how to do those git commands, all those checking out and commits and pushes and all that business. All of this stuff is explained in here. And then if you have help, if you have trouble, you can go on the IRC, and we there we go, developer IRC there, where it talks about how to access that, so you can ask for help if you're having trouble just doing the builds and all. And yeah, it's an active community. There's over 100 people that have contributed, or more, I forget. But the more people we can get involved fixing the bugs that are already reported, and so that was under activity issue tracker is how you get to where that bug list was. And so these are all the bugs that have been reported, and you can see what version they were reported against, what version the person was running when they found the bug. So some of them are bugs that are in the current versions, or even, were reported against older versions. Ones that say they're 3.0, these are ones that are probably new, like things that broke, things that probably work in the current code or just aren't relevant because it's about a new feature. And any of these bugs we're interested in fixing, but there's just tons and tons of bugs that need fixing before we can have any sort of release. And so it's if anyone who's watching this is interested in getting involved, that is absolutely the way to go about it. Let's return to my Qt Creator window. Yeah, it's Oh, did it just crash? No. So yeah, unfortunately, wow, just still slowly working on those files. That's just not going to be at that rate. It's going to take an hour for the compile to finish. And so we're not going to get to see this. Anyhow, that is kind of the process. That's what life is like in MuseScore development. Some bugs are really easy to fix like that. If you know the code, you can fix them in a matter of a couple minutes. And if you don't know the code, it might take you a while to find where the thing is. But even so, it's probably, that some bugs are just a couple of lines of code. Some bugs take a long time to understand what the problem is. It takes a long time just to reproduce the problem. It takes a long time to figure out where the problem is in the code, and then a long time to figure out how to fix it. You might spend a week working on one bug, or you might spend, 5 minutes working on that bug, like I would have been if this wasn't taking so long. Yeah, and new features are nice too, but right now we're really focused. There's a lot of new features already in MuseScore 3, and we're really focused on bug fixing. And that's usually the best way to get involved as a developer, is to start fixing bugs. So again, I've been rambling, just hoping that this would eventually get to a place where we could watch it, but I can see that's just not going to happen. So what I'm going to actually do is probably stop the video and then just start it up again when the build finishes, so that I can show you the testing. And that's what I'm going to do. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Oh, let me just check. I've been watching the IRC chat more than I've been watching my actual YouTube chat and my phone. Okay, yeah, so that's good. So I'm going to sign off for now, and I hope that a little insight into the life of a developer has been interesting to some of you. I know there's some of you who are developers watching, snickering at me for all the mistakes that I'm making in how I'm doing the builds here, but whatever.